Andy.
Hi, Irene.
Hi, thank you for taking the time to chat with me today. So as I already mentioned you, this interview will be published in our newsletter where 1,000 of Italian startups founder will be reading us.
Mhm.
So can you introduce yourself and your company with a special focus on how Pride could help these founders?
Yeah, my name's Andy Su. I'm one of the co-founders and CEO of Pry. So Pry is a financial planning tool for startups. We replace spreadsheets for managing your cash, managing your runway, and really understanding how every new hire impacts your runway and your business. So um, We have several European customers. We're based in America. We're based in San Francisco, but we have several European customers using us using Zero. Many of them in the UK. We support multiple currencies, and we could probably better support the Italian community once we get more of those the customers in the region as well, since we are a startup. But even without the integrations, you can actually log into Pry, create a demo account, or just use Pry for financial planning. Um, and that's something I think every founder should have. If you're a founder and you're managing your finances off the spreadsheets, try our alt tool. We've put a lot of thought into it.
Yeah, we thought it was great when we saw it. It was really interesting for us, and we decided right away to invest in Pride. So absolutely great product.
Thank you.
So
Yeah.
this is not your first startup, and it's not your first time at Y Combinator. So in 2010, you co-founded Indinero, which is another fintech company that grew very quickly and was very successful. How different was your experience as a founder back then compared to now? Can you give us these like different views of how it was being a founder in 2010 and then again in 2021?
Yeah. The scene is much bigger now. In our batch, there was over 300 companies, and I think in the summer batch, I think it'll be something around the same size, if not bigger. Um, but in 2010, when we joined with Indinero, there were 36 companies, and the types of investors are different too. We had one of the biggest raises back then, which was about 1.2 million, and now 1.2 is like for the Silicon Valley area. Okay, I don't. It's like relatively low. So there's more money. There's way more companies, and it did feel like a little bit more like this. The startup community was like full of professors and just like random people you probably never heard of, but very smart. And now there's like directors of Apple, of Google, like Intel, like these tech companies, people who have moved up and the executives, they all have funds, they all have money. And then there's like American Express has a venture arm, and all these like larger companies all have venture arms now. So it's a different scene. It's definitely matured.
Great. Yeah, I saw that change as well. It has been very interesting to live through that great shift that has been happening in the last years, especially in the Valley, but I think quite all over the world, I would say.
Yeah.
Um, so again, with this like comparison between your experience back then and your experience now, is there anything you're doing differently this time around? What would you say, let's say, at the most important lesson that you learned in the last 10 years that made you the entrepreneur that you are today with Pride?
Yeah, I feel like I learned a lot. Probably one of the biggest things is how important it is to work with good people and to be a good judge of character. Whereas 10 years ago, we meet someone who doesn't work out, it's like, oh, we couldn't have known that up front. Whereas now it's like you have this intuition where it's like, oh, like something's a little off. Maybe we can wait for the right person. We don't have to rush when it comes to people. So that's a huge piece of it. Um, there's another one that I think comes with experience, and that's um, just knowing the pace that you have to work at. It's kind of like working out. You're running a marathon, but you need to know how fast you should be going. You don't want to burn out. You don't want to go too quickly and then burn out, and you also don't want to go too slow, so you never finish. So the pace, and then also just knowing the communities there, like everyone is in the startup community is more or less in the same situations and overcoming the same challenges. It's difficult for everyone. Those are a few lessons. And I guess how that's kind of translated is I'm working with a smaller team, and I'm making sure that every person we work with is like that can pull their own weight or like value add, and um, and also to not rush, be able to plan things out ahead of time. So we're building a financial planning company. So it's very much in our nature to think through all steps before just leaping forward and creating chaos. So yeah.
Yeah, great advices. No, absolutely. Thank you. And so I would like to ask you something about your fundraising experience. So as you know, in our Silicon Valley Dojo blog, we recently interviewed Abel from Flutterflow. You're both from the same YC batch and both part of our portfolio. And we asked him questions. We had let's say a deep dive on his experience on YC, like how was the batch, how was like the community. Um, Today, I would like to explore with you another aspect of the YC experience, which is the fundraising process, which is, I think, one of the, let's say, most interesting parts of being part of YC. So can you share with us how it looked like for Pride to fundraise, and how was the role of YC throughout this fundraising process? So I know that with Indinero, you went through YC as well, and you did like a fundraising as well. But again, if you can show us what was the role of YC, what is the real difference between being inside the batch or not? What was your experience?
Yeah, so it's very different from back then. I think even in the early days, there was like Paul Graham was personally trying to get his friends to invest in like Airbnb and all these companies, right? And then even back then in 2010, there could be some warm intros from the partners, but now it's more like less the demo day event. And you don't really get intros from any of the group partners. There isn't like that personal element, but it still works. It works because of the sheer number of investors, the sheer amount of capital that comes together on, for us, one day. So demo day, 1 minute pitch, it is pretty, it's fast. When you're doing it, it's like, bam, you're over. There's like, 300 companies also pitching. And I think the investors all say, yeah, there's so many, it's kind of hard to pick out. And what many of them do is go to the website and look at the things you've written, the type of company you're in, and send out a message without even watching some of the videos. So the video itself, the demo day, sure, was important, but it was really directly after that. On that day, we get anywhere between 50 to 150 pings from investors. I think we got 80 to 100 or something like that. I have to check the numbers, but they all just came from different areas, and they said they're interested and they wanted to talk, and like very quick, I respond to all of them, and we just started a process, and it was fast. So before raising at Y Combinator, I actually raised on my own without it. And that was like a 3-month process. Investors would always ask us to, push back the time, learn a little bit more, see more traction. But during Y Combinator, it's a different environment in that investors are kind of competing, because a lot of the best companies, the rounds close within a few days or a week. So everything's happening quickly. So yeah, it was very hectic, very exciting. I had a good experience, of fundraising from YC, but experiences do vary. I've heard many companies and founders that it does vary depending on their market, depending on their traction, and how far they've gotten. So, but my personal experience is that it was definitely worth it and value add.
Yeah, we saw. I've
Yeah.
never seen anything that hectic in my life. I mean, it was like so fast, and I have to say that some companies asked us like, "Did you have time to see to watch our pitch?" And we were like, "Of course." Oh no, because a lot of investors they just like reached out without
Yeah,
even looking at
I
the
asked you
day.
that too. Yeah, it's like, oh, so you saw? Oh my gosh, yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, we were actually like watching
Mhm.
the whole thing. It was, I have to say, very well
Yeah,
tiring, like
yeah.
350 a day.
Honestly, I don't think I don't think any less
Mm,
of investors who didn't watch a pitch because there are so many, and every company is a big idea. You have to really understand it. You have to spend a lot of time and thought to really, realize what what the company vision is. So there's just too much for a single person to get through in that amount of time. So yeah.
yeah, I have to say that the experience of even like on this side of the table, like investing in YC companies is completely different from the experience of investing in other startups that are not going through the YC demo day. Even like the whole like hectic, the whole rush. Like with YC, we had like an hour to decide on a deal, and the type of due diligence, the type of, I mean, it has to be much faster. It has to be
Hmm.
still deep, but much faster, much. So definitely a pretty intense experience. Interesting, but intense.
Yeah. Yeah. It's very
um,
interesting, and it feels very real too, because a lot of the YC founders, they're like, "You gotta reply to me in an hour," and you're like, "No way!" And you don't reply, and then 2 days later, they're on TechCrunch and they raise like 5 billion or something. So it's like they're really in the thick of it. It's really happening. So that's all
yeah,
very
yeah.
exciting.
It's not just
It's
FOMO.
not
It's
just talk.
actually
Yeah,
real. It's real.
yeah, it's real. Yeah.
So I have a question about the stage. So you raise, let's say that usually YC companies come out and they're raising in their pre-seed or seed stage, generally speaking. So that's where YC, that's the YC sweet spot. That's where YC is like really effective. But I'm interested in seeing if the YC effect actually helps also forward in the fundraising process. Meaning, so with Indinero, you got to raise a Series B.
Hmm.
You had up to a Series B. So what about that? Did you have that kind of YC effect helping, especially with the previous kind of YC way, where it was much more like a one-on-one intro or the partners involved? So that was probably easier helping you through the way. How was like the whole fundraising process up to the several rounds that you have to raise after the pre-seed or seed?
Yeah. So the thing about YC is, and definitely the case now, is that you don't really have much time with the people there after the batch, because it's the same people working with the current batch, and they have to handle, like 300-400 people, companies. So even back in the day, we didn't really get that many like warm intros. It would usually be it would if we had a warm intro, it wouldn't be because we sent an email and said, "Hey, intro me to someone who thinks we're interesting." No, it has to be very direct. Like, we need to research them, we know them, and we look on LinkedIn or somewhere that our only connection is through a group partner, and then we send out that email. So it's very like high intentional. You have to do the work to get that lead. Um, but really, the benefit of YC over time is the community. It's when we go and to a community event, or we meet our other fellow batchmates and we ask them, "Hey, how are things? How are you doing?" And they tell us, "Oh yeah, we just raised money from this guy. He's really cool." And then that's how we get the network, how we get the intro for the future investors. Um, in fact, I did this just a couple weeks ago. I was talking to a fellow batchmate, and they were telling me about one of their investors, and now I'm very interested in pursuing like conversations with him. So, I mean, not anytime soon because we're not raising right now, but he's on my list now. So, really, it's part of the ongoing community, and you have to do the work to go out and meet your other founders and batchmates. They are your greatest source of leads, right? They're in the same situation as you. They want to help you, and just getting coffee every now and then could lead to a lot of opportunities.
Yeah. So actually you anticipated my next question, because I'm very interested in understanding more about this community.
Yeah.
We talked about this with Abel, the previous interview with Abel from Flow. He talked a lot about how
Hmm.
strategic and important was the community for him, the YC community for him.
Yeah.
And he said that one of, I would say, the main perks of being part of YC was to have access to Bookface and to the whole network. And so you have been part of Bookface actually since 2010, I guess, from like, I
Hmm.
mean, from the first experience. Um, how did that impact your company, especially maybe at the beginning, if you reached out to specific founders? So again, how did Bookface and the network really help you with your companies?
Yeah. So the community, there's so many things that make the community great. First of all, obviously the people. And one of the first things that happen is when you reach out to somebody and say that you're part of the community, um, it becomes a not a cold email anymore. Like usually you see the CEO somewhere, they're building a big company, and you email them, you're not going to get anything. But through YC, it just feels like we all kind of know where our roots are. So you're more likely to get a response if you craft a nice personalized email. So that's always great. And then on Bookface, there's always, I think of Bookface as like it's a forum. So people are posting their side projects, people are posting their new launches, the new projects, and you see a lot of activity twice a year because the new companies come in. It's like launch Bookface, and some of it is helps you stay current with what's getting built, and then also kind of inspirational because like I started a Prize, my second company, and much of that is really because I'm in Silicon Valley and I'm talking to all my friends and people in the area, and I see all these launches on Bookface. And it really motivates me to build more in technology and start a new company. So there's that aspect that keeps you going. It's very different to be building, by yourself, and it's very lonely a lot of times. And this is a really helpful to founders like us. Um, More strategically, like I think the most value add, well, some of the most value add things about Bookface is really there's an investor network, an investor database, and they rate like YC founders can rate investors and give them good scores, bad scores, bad experiences, and so on. Which Lombard Street is great, by the way. So quick plug there. But it's actually very valuable because especially the early stage of funding, there's a lot of investors that have taken advantage of founders. There are definitely these horror stories that you can look up. I was reading Jessica Livingston's Founders at Work, and there's a few in there that's quite interesting. And it's very important because through my Indenaro journey, I've actually met with a lot of founders and friends, and some of the things we talk about behind closed doors, there's really like two main struggles I hope I never have to deal with. One is founders trouble when founders are splitting up or a high important employee, like there's massive friction there, of course. And the other is on the cap table. It's like with the investor, and the investor ones, the founder ones and the employee ones, the founder at least has a plan. They're like, here's a termination agreement. California, they're going to get it done. It's messy, but they can get it done. But the investors' part is really difficult because getting somebody off the cap table is very difficult. And many of these investors are more sophisticated at dealing with these types of things because they're usually the ones to get themselves into this type of situation. So I'm very aware of picking out investors, which is why the investor database is very important for YC and Bookface and users, and it's highly protected, and people like feel very confident like posting on there, which is really important.
Yeah, that's extremely helpful for a founder in its fundraising process. Great. Um, Again about fundraising, then you did it twice. So and you learned a lot, I guess, from probably hundreds or thousands of meetings you had with investors. In our blog, in our audience, we have a lot of companies that are trying, a lot of founders that are trying to fundraise. What are the best advices you can give them? What is the best, I would say, even practical advices, because a lot of
Hmm.
times they get like stuck in the actual execution of the fundraising, of the raising. Like, how do I
Yeah.
actually do that? How do I get out and start talking to these people?
Yeah. So I'll give some advice that's I don't know if it's the usual, but I would say first of all, founders should really understand how investments work, how venture capital or investments work. You should one thing you can do is, would you invest in your own company? And for many founders, if they're engineers, you'll probably be like, no, I wouldn't. I don't know why anyone would invest, but people have gotten investment. So, but if you look at how the investment ecosystem works, you look at how people place bets in the companies that look like yours, and eventually Airbnb pops up and gives like, a few thousand X returns. You start to see that investors are just rational actors. They're just people trying who are following a good set of rules, just like yourself. Um, so when you talk to 100 people and they tell you no, it's not personal. It's that you don't look like a good investment at the moment. So maybe if you think with that mindset, you can start improving upon it. Um, what looks like a great investment? Well, number one is metrics. If your metrics are going up there and the numbers are there, it can't be faked, and it doesn't. Nothing else matters. You're automatically a good investment. But many of us don't have that. So at the very early stage, it really is the team, because no matter how you spin the market, how you spin, um, your idea. Other people could come up with your idea. A lot of people are aware of the market. Um, but what's unique about you at your stage is your team. So that's why in the seed funding stages, if you don't have metrics, investors put a high priority on team, and you should as well. So that's probably what I got for you for now.
That's great. That's actually exactly what we usually say to the founders we talk to. Like, that the most important thing for us is the team and the metrics. So you
Yeah.
definitely said exactly on point what we usually say. Last question, and let's talk about Silicon Valley. So we're both based here, both have been living here. You have been living here at least for the last 15 years, at least.
10 years. Yeah.
Okay, so how did Silicon Valley and being here impacted on your companies and on the fundraising process? So do you think it has been like different being here rather than being, I don't know, in LA or Chicago or somewhere else? And how did it change from 2010? Well, it did for sure, but as a founder,
Mhm.
how Silicon Valley, how do you think it changed from 2010 to today? Being here is it still important? Is it still valuable? Do you still have the same type of relationship with the network here?
Yeah. So the what's really interesting about Silicon Valley is um, the community, the people. You walk down a coffee shop and someone's talking about startups, someone's pitching a VC. Um, I'm in Soma, and yeah, every time I grab coffee, it's like someone's talking about a startup. Like it really is like that. It just reminds you of in some sense what you're supposed to do, what you're supposed to become, right? So I think for starting a company, Silicon Valley is still the best place for it. If you're more established, you move to LA or a hub with plenty of people, it's still good. Um, but even the on Bookface, the YC community, there are events in Silicon Valley every now and then. There's also events in New York that I'm seeing. But if you're living in Texas or Midwest, or sometimes even in Seattle or somewhere, you don't see as many meetups, and the community isn't as strong. So I think when you're starting a company, it's great to be in Silicon Valley. Over the last 12 years, it's gotten way more expensive. It felt expensive 12 years ago, and now it's like, more. So that's probably like, so I do think that the founder should be here, not just for investment money, but for the community, to meet other founders and really get a sense of, like, you're getting coffee at the same place as all these unicorn founder billionaire people. You're in the same spot. You can be one of them. That's really powerful.
Thank you, Andy. That was extremely interesting. Thank you for your time.
Of course. Thanks for having me.